First, we're going to speak about the situation that was reported last night with a person who tested positive for the coronavirus.
16 cases so far have been detected and confirmed in the U.S.
We now know there are confirmed cases in 35 countries.
The World Health Organization declared the outbreak an international public health emergency.
We must focus on containment while doing everything we can to prepare for a potential pandemic.
Today we made a big decision. We decided to move all of our in-person classroom work online.
We're going to put out an executive order today. New York State on pause, policies that assure uniform safety for everyone.
There's nothing we can do except understand that these sacrifices are for the health of our public and for the health of our future generations. This is an emergency situation.
And today we're bringing it to 100% of the workforce must stay home.
Walking back from Craft to Cup, takeout of course. Look at those forsythia, isn't that beautiful? And there's Maine. A couple people walking around, and then the library. Oh, the library is so beautiful but so quiet. Hope you're doing okay. Here's the video this week from campus. Here's Sunset Lake. Oh, look at it, it's so pretty. But it's kind of dreary today, cloudy, raining a little bit. I saw over here the beginning of spring, beautiful daffodils. We miss you. Have a good week. We miss you. We miss you. Wish you were here. Bye-bye.
How did you occupy your time during the pandemic?
I got really into skateboarding right when the pandemic started.
Before coming to campus, I spent a lot of my time doing kind of like crafts, like textile work, and also like chatting with people from the school on a group chat.
I worked out a lot, played a lot of video games, tried to socially distance, hang with friends, maybe get a game of like beach volleyball if it wasn't too cold.
It's mostly looking for jobs, taking care of my siblings, just a lot of housework. I got into baking and cooking a lot.
Before coming back to campus, I was at my parents' house in New Jersey, and I was doing nothing. I didn't have a job.
During the pandemic, I tried to spend a lot of time with my family because, I don't know, we're always on the go, and because of the pandemic, I got a chance to help out and, you know, spend time with my younger siblings, so it was nice.
As cases in New York dropped, Vassar students, staff, and administration formed the Vassar Together Committee to figure out how to make a safe return to campus.
Vassar Together consisted of a large group of representatives from across the campus. It included faculty members, it included administrators, it included students as well as staff. Students, would undergo testing, would be masked, 6 feet, social distance, and then be able to kind of fully participate in the life of the college. And so these protocols have allowed us to return, be successful, again, while limiting exposure both internally within our campus, but also limiting exposure to our broader community, because we also wanted to limit possible spread into the Poughkeepsie community.
This was one of the things that we've spent a lot of time talking about when we were first trying to come up with the model of how to set up the campus. Do we allow students to go off campus, or do we keep them all on campus? How dangerous is it for someone to go to my market, or maybe even to the pharmacy? We need to figure out a way to bring all of that onto campus somehow.
How do we continue to build community and also make sure that we're helping to keep people safe? And so a lot of those standards related to mask wearing and related to being in pods and only having the opportunity to do some activities in pods, or maintaining the 6 feet distance, not going in and out of different houses, residential houses. I mean, those things we recognize are challenging, but they really were state dictates and Department of Health dictates.
We realized that, this pandemic was not going away. It was going to continue, and that there was going to have to be some decisions made about what we were going to do for the fall for students. And so I ended up getting onto the Vassar Together Committee.
The community care team is we are put in pods is what we created. And those pods have students and employees. It's a mixed group. And so when they engage in a restorative conversation with someone who's been reported, it really is about assessing need. It's asking questions. It's seeing if there's anything that someone doesn't understand that we could help clarify, or any need we could meet towards the purpose of getting them to adhere to the standard. And I have to say that has been very positive.
So the COVID dashboard is a kind of daily instrument and tool that we've used actually since early fall. And one thing that we wanted to do with our community was be very transparent in terms of the information that we provided them. Our students and our faculty, as well as the folks who work here, are very engaged in the community and want to know what's going on. And so we thought that the dashboard would be a very useful instrument in kind of communicating to the community where we were by way of total number of positive cases that we may have on campus at any one time. So the basic information kind of that's on the COVID dashboard, right, is the number of students or tests that we're administering, the positivity rate, the number of positive cases on campus or active positive cases on campus that we have at any one time. And more recently, we've added an additional measure, which is the percentage of students who are at some phase or stage of the vaccination process.
How does safety and security respond to reports of not social distancing? That's a good question. Just our presence, our response does tend to remind people to follow the safety rules. If we can identify who they are, then CCT might talk to them to have an educational conversation.
Our primary purpose when we started in August 2020 was really for education. How were we going to orient our new students and all the continuing students on what the community care standards were?
So our approach is one of community care. We have an entire set of protocols that are really state-of-the-art public health templates for how to manage in the threat of a virus. These protocols go for everything from move-in to classes to residential life, co-curricular, extracurricular activities. How do we use PPE, social distancing, hand hygiene, testing, tracing, quarantine, self-quarantine, isolation, treatment, how we stay up on the CDC, et cetera, other guidelines. We have protocols for all of that, and they really need to be followed. If we follow those protocols, we're improving our safety tremendously.
It's more likely that people who have come here and have committed to following the rules that we're trying to put in place for people's safety, that if they're more likely to do it here than if you go out into the community, you can't make other people follow those same rules.
So one of the things that Vassar Together really worked hard on was how to return close to a little over 2,000 students safely, not just the students, right, but their families who were moving them in. And so what we wanted to do per kind of local and state regulations is minimize campus density at any one time. And so we established kind of a set of protocols where students could return on a particular date and time with their families, right, in the fall, but also in the spring. The phase move-in model, right, really relied on the students testing or receiving at least 3 negative tests right within the first 7 days of arrival. And once the students got their negative tests, right, then they could begin to fully participate in the residential house, going to classes, and then students who may have tested positive would then move to other locations so that they could kind of serve their quarantine or isolation periods.
Inside of the houses, we have put out measures to minimize spread and reduce the harm that could happen by COVID-19 spreading. So in the houses, masks were the latest fashion accessory. So everyone got in the habit of putting the mask on before they leave their room. Whether they were going to the bathroom, to the parlor, or leaving the house, you put your mask on. That was one of the most important ways that we kept COVID-19 in control inside of the residential spaces.
Through the establishment of these protocols that Vassar Together developed, students, right, would undergo testing, would be masked, 6 feet, social distance, and then be able to kind of fully participate in the life of the college.
With the pandemic, we really had to rethink about the safety of our associates who work in dining services. We really need to follow strict guidelines as far as safe six and social distancing, while also being able to prepare food for the number of students that eat. I think, one of the major concerns initially was the staff. They were very concerned about the fact that, we needed to take a staff of over close to 70 employees over in Gordon Commons alone, and how we were going to keep them safe while preparing meals. We addressed that by looking at staffing schedules. We also addressed it by looking at different food platforms and what we can offer, and really recreating our menu engineering. And we wanted to be able to provide variety and a choice, and really allow students to still create their own meals wherever possible. The other thing was going from a self-serve operation to a completely served operation. We slowly phased indoor dining in. We started with the second and third floor, where we had a 33% capacity, and then we continued to open indoor dining on the first floor of Gordon Commons. And really that was dependent upon the number of cases that were on campus at the time.
The model also really relies on various forms of teaching. So we created kind of a hybrid model of teaching where there was a certain percentage of our students who chose to remain home remotely for a variety of reasons, but we still wanted to give them access to the great kind of educational experience that students who would stay on campus. So classes operated inside, but also many classes in the fall. And now that the spring has returned and the weather's beautiful, many classes have returned to being outside in a variety of tents that we have spread out throughout campus.
I think it's important. I always think it's important to make sure students are actually getting the education that they are here to get. By saying you've missed this deadline because you've been dealing with all of this stressful stuff, we're just not going to allow you to do it, that's not really supporting their education. However, just saying you're going to pass everything because you've had this hard time, that's not supporting their education either, right? So you want people to learn something while they're here. I think we've had to adjust how we do that as professors. And I think sometimes that worked and sometimes it didn't, right? And I really hope that students have found that they are still learning and valuing the education that they're getting while they're here, even during the pandemic.
All but one of my classes are in person. One of my classes is remote now, but it'll become in person once the professor's vaccinated. I think remote classes, the difficulty for me is just sitting still for, well over an hour sometimes. And, being on a laptop, you can just basically do whatever you want in Zoom class. So it's more a struggle on my end.
For the most part, I feel like the professors have been doing a pretty good job of keeping them pretty engaging.
Some are better than others. This is a personal preference, truly. It's just I have a hard time paying attention, especially when I can turn my camera off. This semester, I've had a much better time with Zoom classes. I think the professors have really started to understand what works and what doesn't work over Zoom, which I appreciate.
I've been surprised by how engaging some of my Zoom classes have been, and especially being an education minor, the education professors, they literally study how to teach and how to teach in an engaging manner, and so those classes have been awesome. Professors that are really taking the time to listen to the students or even just survey them. You don't have to have a one-on-one conversation necessarily about it, but how they learn best and what things are really obstacles to learning, and really taking those into account when assigning readings and thinking about what kind of assessments they're going to do, and how much they need to have a variety of activities in classes. And some of my professors have really taken that to heart.
I would say some of them are pretty engaging, some of them aren't. I think the real differentiation is that some professors really know how to use the tech well and make an advantage of the Zoom classroom, and other professors are just trying to do the same old thing and it doesn't really work.
The pod system started in fall of 2020, and it was a way to have students on campus stay connected to others, feel intimate with other people, while still staying safe in the COVID guidelines. So a student could be in a group of up to 6 people, and you could get together, you don't have to wear masks, you can be less than 6 feet apart, and feel like you have a family unit here. While then that group can then go out into the greater community, still wearing masks, maintaining physical distance, and keeping everyone safe. The house teams really settled into their own house community, and we had a mixture, a hybrid of interaction that was virtual, but also in person. So perhaps there was a crafts night, and I know Cushing House did one of these, many others did, but it would be a hybrid. You gather together to pick up some food, pick up some supplies, and then you go back to your individual spaces to then get on a call where everyone's doing the activity together. There are also in-person activities that we've done safely outside. Noise House just finished up a farmer's market in Noise Circle where people were outside together, safely interacting with the vendors that came to campus, and it's been a great experience.
And then I think throughout our student growth and engagement team, just continuing to do programming to give students the opportunity to be together, and to be together sometimes in person, within the limits that we have, but doing grab and go meals, and so getting to wave and see people as they pick up a meal and then meet us back on Zoom, and then having Zoom discussions and clubs and book clubs and gatherings of that sort.
I've become more involved with student activities when I came back to campus. So before the pandemic, I was only involved with the matriculate program, which helps high school seniors in their college application process. Now I am also an opinions columnist for the Miscellany News, and I'm a lay editor for the Gray Matters Journal.
What's been good is I've been able to take advantage of the dance class offerings. So I've gotten back into dancing. And the studios are big enough for us to be able to social distance and dance.
My relationship with my friends, definitely just, we would talk and we would do Zoom parties and virtual dollar beer night, which is from Billy Bob's, but it still felt a little weird, I think, at times. It didn't feel like we were interacting in a very whole way.
These days, I think I find the most familiar comfort in just hanging out with my friends. Days like this when you can just go outside and walk around or I don't know, play a game or something have been just the best and just feel really normal because you can sit outside and eat without a mask on. It just feels kind of like it's back to a little bit of normalcy.
I feel like I'm lucky to have had my freshman year as a regular campus. I can't imagine what freshmen or sophomores now feel since they had half of their semester cut. Spring of my freshman year is when I build friendship, made all the friends, had all the activities, and now it's none of that. I don't feel like I'm personally missing out since I had a freshman year, but for the years below, they're definitely in for a change.
I feel like I'm missing out on the typical college experience. I would definitely love to, to be going to parties all the time and seeing my friends whenever I want. But this is our college experience. We get to kind of tell our story after this, and who else is going to be able to be we went through fucking crazy. I don't know if I can say this. We went through some serious stuff.
How do you think Vassar has been handling the pandemic? At first I was a little skeptical because they were one of the few schools that were actually going to be open. So I was a little scared as to how that was going to look like and whether I should have maybe just taken a semester off. I think Vassar's been doing a pretty good job in terms of food security and housing and testing. So I think they've definitely done a good job.
The general guidelines have done a good job. Our cases weren't too high last semester. They seem to be steadily holding so far this semester. I haven't checked in a couple days.
I think that Vassar has been handling the pandemic very well. I think that we've seen a very low number of cases. There's been very little risk, and I think a great job has been done handling the pandemic. I think that for the problems that persist, it's not a perfect world, and it's not necessarily the fault of the administration. It very well could be, but I'm not totally sure. I'm not one of those people to like just pin the blame. So I think that Vassar has done a good job, and for all of the emotions that students face, like loneliness and anxiety during the pandemic, I feel like these would be natural anyways, for B especially.
How has the pandemic affected your mental health?
I actually think the pandemic has probably had a positive impact on my mental health because, I mean, like the world has been like really bad for like the past 20 years. And I feel like in the past year, that's like the first time we've had this collective like societal acknowledgement of like, oh, like we live in a dystopian hellscape. And I also think that there's been like a widespread cultural push towards people like taking medications, being in therapy, that sort of thing. So like, I think that during the pandemic, I've had more time to like figure out what resources I need.
The pandemic has been definitely hard on my mental health because I feel like college especially is a time when like mental health issues definitely like come up just in general. Like that's like just the age that we're at. The fact that we have to isolate or just like, you know, wear masks and not be around a lot of people a lot of the time is like a big factor in the way that we like perceive the world.
I feel like, okay, so I live in the THs, so I feel like my mental health is a lot different in comparison to everyone who's living on campus because I'm constantly around my friends, so it's not as if I'm in isolation or like alone in my single. So in terms of that, like being surrounded by people that like I want to be surrounded by, I'm always getting that.
A lot of the classes, especially the remote ones, have been very lenient in terms of workload and readings. Even last semester too, I was having a lot of trouble with my own kind of mental health, and a lot of my professors were very accommodating. They gave me extensions on certain deadlines, and they just understood that I needed a little bit more time to learn and to process. So most of them have been very nice about extensions and about the workload.
I think in terms of mental health and emotionally, it hasn't been the greatest time for me. I think I struggled a lot with burnout, and I'm definitely what I would describe maybe more of a social person. So I think not being able to see anyone or see friends and get sent home and be stuck inside for that long really messed with my brain.
I think that I kind of need that routine in my life to have somewhat of a healthy mental state. And on top of that, there's the whole like social deprivation that's happening right now that just makes everything harder for everybody.
I think some of my relationships have definitely deteriorated during the pandemic. Not in, I'd say, a bad way. I just say I don't see them. I haven't heard from them in so long.
During the pandemic, I feel like my relationships, it's been 50-50. There have been like new ways to communicate with friends, like more Zooming, Netflix parties, stuff like that to like foster friendships. But also I miss the in-person aspect of campus life and just like building friendships that way.
Sometimes the professor is noticing that the student needs some support. And I think when you're in a Zoom environment, it's sometimes harder to know that that's the case, right? So you have someone whose screen is turned off, or you don't get that interaction before or after class to check in with the student. And so that's where I felt like it was harder for us to get support to students because sometimes you didn't even know what was happening and that they needed something.
How are we working to address student mental health concerns? I mean, a variety of ways. I mean, I think counseling is certainly one of those ways, right? Counseling services has a number of things that they offer, right? Group sessions, individual sessions. This year, they've introduced walk-in sessions, which means that students have the capacity to call in, if you will, and ask to speak to someone, typically to kind of work through something in the moment. It's not therapeutic, right? But kind of this very practical application of therapeutic support. So they've definitely been doing that. One of the things that they've noticed this year that's different than last year because of because now we provide teletherapy is they actually have much fewer cancellations, right? So students who can't like woke up late to a session now get an email and be like, oh, I'll jump on right now. Where previously they would have had to go to Metcalf and maybe miss the appointment. So they've just seen a lot less no-shows, right, for those appointments.
Have you accessed Vassar's mental health resources?
Yes, I have accessed Vassar mental health resources. Like after finding someone who worked for me, I think it's been great and really helpful.
So I reached out to Vassar therapists and psychiatrists, and they gave me different resources. I talked with some really great Vassar therapists, and I joined a group therapy, which was also really nice. It was also online. Everything has been online. For me, group therapy has been really effective, as well as individualized therapy.
I do not regret my decision to come back to campus. I'm a pretty introverted guy, but I need a social element of life, and like being on campus is super fun.
No, I don't regret being on campus last semester. I think that this semester it's been hard seeing anybody really, but I know it would have been a lot harder for me if I was not here last semester.
I decided to come to campus because I felt even if it couldn't be, the regular experience that people expect from college, it was as good as it was going to get. I'd been stuck in my house for 6 months, 9 months. So I feel like I made the right decision. Something's better than nothing.
I think the biggest thing that I have learned from COVID is that humans are really good at adapting. My family adapted really well to this situation. I think that I adapted really well to this situation. I think that in a lot of ways, this school adapted well to this situation. I'm impressed with everybody's ability to kind of like pivot from normal life to something that is so not normal.
I think, for me, one of the things that I've learned about myself is just I have a lot more capacity than I ever kind of imagined in terms of not just thinking about the things that I can take on, but the kinds of things that I can learn.
I learned that having friends is super important, and time alone with my parents can really like strengthen our relationship when the rest of the world is burning. And I think that mental health is like one of the most important things a person has to handle at any moment, because that determines someone's happiness and someone's productivity and just ties in so many other things.
No thing is too small to really appreciate. And things that we have done this year that now seem difficult to do, maybe it's a hug, maybe it's just smiling at one another and seeing that in each other's faces. Those are the small things that perhaps before this year I took for granted, and I don't think I will moving forward for the rest of my life.
I would say I've learned that I need structure. With the pandemic, there was so little structure in my life, and now that I'm on campus and I've actually started doing clubs and my schedule is tightened up, I've felt more stressed than I ever did during quarantine, but at the same time I feel more productive and I guess mentally healthy.
Literally anything could happen. I feel like everyone says that, but like actually anything could happen. I guess at this point I'm just like, okay, in the grand scheme of things, the little things really don't matter.
What are you hopeful for?
I'm hopeful for the vaccine. I'm going to be fully vaccinated by early May, actually because of my work-study job at Vassar.
I'm looking forward to trying to figure out how to build, in some cases, maybe even rebuild relationships with students. There's a generation of particularly first year students that don't know us as well as our juniors and our seniors do. Generation of sophomores who like missed out on the second half of the semester, who don't know administrators as well. And so I'm hopeful for the capacity, both for the students and then on mine, or figure out like, well, how do we start to build back up that relationship?
I am hopeful for what we all are hopeful for, that this will be history soon.
There are so many things that I'm very excited to experience without 6 feet of distance between me and someone else. I'm excited for more in-person classes, especially since I like to do theater stuff, which is so much about connection with other people.
I'm hopeful for this being over soon, because I know that a lot of people around me are getting vaccinated, and I just think it's about time that we close this chapter. And yeah, I'm hopeful for a different experience in college, a different experience in life.
I don't know. I guess I'm talking to like students right now, but just document what life is like right now here, because this is a really weird like historical anomaly, and we're going to be asked about it for the rest of our lives.
This is still Vassar. We're going to be okay, and this too will pass. So that's what I would add.